always.
Back to me.
And kind of ramble a little bit more about like my philosophy towards glass and how chemistry has influenced that while I'm working on this guy, because again it's kind of hard to see exactly what I'm doing with the glass. So what really fascinates me about molecules is that there's so much complexity that arises from such simple little bits. You'll see all these, there's just 3 little piles of bits I'm making that are different. And then when I put them together, it creates these complex and, in my opinion, beautiful shapes. And the slightest little difference in how those assemble will completely change what the molecule is, what its nature is. If it's an odorant molecule, if it's a psychoactive molecule, if it's a poison, if it's healthy.
Can you turn sound down a little bit and Dan's mic up a little? Music sound? Just a little. I'll also turn it up a little out here.
So making so many of these little molecules has definitely also influenced how I approach designs, which I'll talk about when I start making this rig here pretty soon. Talk a little bit about the design stage and the planning stage. And I try as often as possible to use replication of simple components. Oops. So when I pick these little bits up, sometimes they get knocked off the handle. And sometimes I'll find them and reattach them. A lot of the time it's faster on the tiny scale, which making me one real quick. So as I was saying, on larger work and more complicated projects, a lot of the time I focus on having relatively simple and repetitive prep that comes together into something grander. The whole, there's that phrase that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, I think that's how it goes. Where you can get some really impressive visual effects with just simple little balls or orbs or paints.
Go to top for a sec. Good. Oh, you extend my tripod leg to match the other two.
So this
Other way.
next 4 are going to be the tetrahedral shape. So instead of just adding 2 little bits to each, I'm adding 3 little bits. Changes how they come together. And as I mentioned, trying to realize that this work is not so replicable or approachable necessarily, but I will show you guys afterwards like a little more zoomed out of the setup I'm using. It actually is pretty easy to go and set up something similar, if not identical, to what I'm working on here. And if you guys have the time and interest, I'd strongly recommend diving into smaller work, whether it's this small or even just or even just turning down the torch on your whatever burner you use and trying to push your limits on the size. I think there's a lot to be learned. I dropped another little bit, so I'm gonna have to make one more real quick.
So right now, we're doing about 15 minutes, multi-streaming onto both of the YouTube channels, a couple places on Facebook, just to kind of give a broader audience. So we have many more people watching right now for about 15 minutes, and there's a link in there. So if anyone else wants to sign up for the class, they can still join, and they will get access for 10 days, I think.
Oh, cool.
After the class to see it.
You know your mic's muted, right?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So if you gotta turn it on, it's that little button at the top left.
I want to say that. Okay, so guys, I wanted to welcome everyone who's, we're on black, we have black camera knocked out. There's just black.
Yes.
Front camera.
I'm working on it.
Alright, so anyway, I wanted to welcome everyone who's who's joining us just for a second. I want to share the stream with a broader audience to show what Dan's working on. There's a link in all the stuff that I've shared so that you guys can sign up, and you guys will be going till 6 o'clock, and you guys will have access to the workshop for 10 days afterwards to review.
Sorry.
So welcome everyone from all the other stream places that we have going on right now. Sorry for the brief black screen. We were just adjusting the cameras.
Yeah, hello everyone new and everyone that's already been in the class hanging out. Working on a micro little molecule right here. So right now I'm prepping all these little bits that will be atoms for the molecule. I'm right now adding extra little bits to the orbs that I already made that will become the bonds here in just a second. Working on a Smith little torch with pretty much hair thin stringers. I'm going to be switching this prep over again, so you might have to shift the top camera.
Okay, no worries.
Top, Kevin?
Nope.
Just
Stay where you are.
Okay.
So now is the quote-unquote fun part. Which for me is sometimes the stressful part. I really do enjoy making so much repetitive tiny motions. It's an interesting meditation where I really just become my fingertips. It's unlike anything I've really ever experienced. But now it's a little more involved. I'm taking the bits that I've already made, sticking them together to become the molecule. So again, after this micro one, I think we're still live with an extended audience. If you guys sign up for the class and tune in, after this micro molecule, I'll be making a larger one where it might be a little easier to show some of the nuances and technical aspects of it, but I'm pretty much heating up both of these little pegs.
Yeah, we'll be probably for about 10 or 15 minutes on a broader stream, and I'll turn that off.
Perfect. They'll probably be able to see me like put together most of the structure, maybe not finalize it. So what I'm doing when I put these together is, if the prep is perfectly even, I'm just heating up 2 bits and plopping them together. It doesn't make a truly perfect seal when I do that, but it's enough to hold itself together and enough for me to position everything just right. And again, on the larger scale, it'll be a little easier for me to explain a lot of the little thought processes that are going through my head as I'm doing this, because it's just so quick and so hard to see on this scale. But if there is any inconsistencies, I'm thinking about how to account for them. So if one little bit on one of these orbs is bigger than the one I'm attaching it to, I'll sink a lot more heat into the bigger ones so that I can plop them together, and when I stretch it out, it makes a nice even bar. If I got them equally hot, it would make more of a tapered connection. And to finish up, there's a lot of rings involved in molecules. This one's a benzene ring, 6 carbons linked together. That'll be part of an indole ring, which is when I add pentagon to the side of it. So I just heat up both of the little pegs separately, connect them. Then it's just a little bit of push and pull and floating it into place. One thing that's absolutely crucial on the tiny work that might be kind of hard to see is that I'm only ever holding one of these 2 handles as soon as I make the connection. So as soon as the thing's in place, I let go of one. And when I'm pushing things around and adjusting things, I never have a good grip on both handles. Just the natural kind of vibration of my fingers and the shakiness of my hands would completely separate all these little connections if I tried to hold on to it. I'm not actually that steady-handed. So that's kind of translated to the bigger work. I'll be talking about that a lot when I'm doing some hollow shaping and even just making the larger scale version of this. This paper towel I have my prep on, and they've shown a few times. You don't have to switch to it at all, right? No. towel helps me pick up the prep. Actually, I just had one knock off of it. I had to grab my tweezers because the little 1 mil rods are so small. So when I'm doing almost anything with glass, I'm never really trying to force things into place. It's more of letting the glass float where it wants to and needs to be, and creating the right conditions with heat and gravity, and sort of guiding the glass to do what it wants to do in a controlled way. Which is another interesting sort of parallel to chemistry, in that when these molecules interact and when reactions happen and everything, you're never actually like putting together atoms like I am here. You're just setting up conditions and allowing the universe to act on them. So these now are the little tetrahedral components. The one thing my models don't exactly convey is double bonds and single bonds, but they're inferred by the geometry of it. So those first two little ring structures I put together are alternating double bonds, which keep everything flat. So to a trained eye looking at it and seeing that that's all flat, they would know there's double bonds there. This part that gets more three-dimensional is all single bonds in the molecule.
So High Noon, that's the way he's pronouncing his name, his nickname. Mm-hmm. He says, "Damn, that is so small."
Yeah.
And then they say everyone's doing good, the cameras are good, except for it went dark for a second, but we know why.
Awesome. And yeah, guys, please feel free to pipe up with any questions or comments or anything about what I'm doing or about me. It's kind of hard to just suddenly jump into introducing myself. I'm not used to doing that, so I feel like I slightly butchered that little portion, but if you guys are curious about any of my past or curious about chemistry or anything.
Yeah, I think that your intro was great, and
cool.
But I'm sure people are curious. I'm sure everyone is really curious, and we have about 50, 60 people watching total
cool.
right now.
Super cool.
And I'll turn that off in about 10 minutes of the other streams, something like that. Yeah.
So right here, what I'm doing is adding a bridge to the molecule, so I can go and finalize everything. This again will be a little easier to like explain and really see what I'm doing when I do the larger one. But that whole little arm structure that sticks up would just flop immediately when I go into finalize, or I like to joke, stabilize all the bonds. So I have to add this bridge where that won't be part of the molecule at all. Won't be any part of the molecule, but for now it holds everything in place.
I was wondering if you were going to be doing bridges too, and I was like thinking about doing on a small scale like this. It's really cool to see the little bridge.
And it's fun. The micro scale stuff, like I've said a few times, totally directly translates to the larger scale work. So when I go and do the larger one, I have some of the prep already done, because the biggest thing that's different is the time it takes. You guys saw when I was making all the tiny little gathers to make this one, it's like split second, just in the flame it's ball, in the flame it's a ball. Larger ones obviously take a little more time to gather up, and you have to let them cool down.
So Dan,
yeah.
Oh wait, turn on my phone 1 second. So Dan, High Noon is asking if you could talk a little bit more about your chemistry background.
Cool, yes.
Yeah.
So I got a Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry from UC Santa Cruz, class of 2017. Always been fascinated by chemistry after thankfully having a really awesome high school chemistry teacher. Kind of got me intrigued in it. And a lot of times I turn the flame off on accident when I'm trying to adjust it. It's so small. I also interrupt myself a lot while I'm doing this work, so I'll try to say something about this and then jump back to whatever I was talking about, so bear with me, High Noon. So I got my degree in chemistry 2017. I also started blowing glass right about the time when I was studying chemistry. Moved to Santa Cruz from Southern California to go to school and found a local class with Nathan Bennett, Santa Cruz Glass Picks on Instagram. I highly recommend looking into his work. Super nice guy, super open with information. Teaches these awesome beginner classes in the Santa Cruz area. Rents torch space and all that. So there's my non-sponsored plug for Santa Cruz Glass. Go look them up. And so I completely fell in love with glass the second I touched it. First piece of glass I put in the flame, I knew it was what I wanted to do forever. And I also became completely obsessed with chemistry and the concepts of molecules and molecular geometry and how the slightest little changes in molecules can have such a profound effect in how they manifest in our reality. I'm most intrigued by psychedelic compounds and psychoactives and the role of molecular chemistry in consciousness. A lot of really cool research out there. I'll maybe during lunch break or something type up a few references to look into if you're interested in some of the stuff I've been talking about. But there's been a ton of fascinating research that was kind of halted in the 50s and 60s and is just now kind of making a resurgence into the implications of the psychedelic experience in the human consciousness.
So some of that, can you turn my mic on for a second, Kev?
Yep, you're live.
So some of this, and Dan and I haven't really had a conversation about this, but we're on exactly the same page here about how chemicals and especially psychedelics or ethnogens is how they're kind of being referred to now have an integral role in how we perceive reality and what is reality and maybe the different dimensions that it might give access to of things that we can't perceive in this dimension with the standard brain chemistry that we have. But like Dan's saying, dimethyltryptamine is part of so many animals and plants. It's super common and a main structural component for other psychedelics. Some of this initial research was done with a group that I'm involved with. It's Esalen, which is it's a place in Big Sur where they in the 50s and 60s did a lot of this initial human potential movement research and had classes on psychedelics and usage and safe space, and they just recently started to really loosen up and open that up again, and they held a class with an author, Michael Pollan, who wrote a book recently called what was the book called?
How to Change Your Mind.
How to Change Your Mind.
Right now, I was reading it last night.
Yeah, How to Change Your Mind.
Cool.
It's a super cool book, and Michael Pollan's a very accomplished author, and they just recently held a class there. It was about a year ago. I tried to get in. It was about 10 to 20 people they let in. I think 300 people applied. So yeah, it's an amazing stuff to look at and to be part of this resurgence and education around how psychedelics affect us. And I'm sure as a lot of you guys know, MDMA is in stage 3 trials for therapy, FDA approved soon. Ketamine is approved right now for therapeutic uses. And I'm sure you guys know in Oakland, plant medicine has been decriminalized, so that means that mushrooms, ayahuasca, peyote, ibogaine, all those have been decriminalized in Oakland, and I think in Colorado and maybe another state, mushrooms are decriminalized as well. So we're really at the forefront of psychedelic acceptance and really the uses that psychedelics can have to enhance our reality and our ability to not get depressed and all kinds of amazing stuff. So there's my 2 cents on that. Sorry to take it away from you for
well
a second.
Well said, Dustin. Thanks for taking it away. So while he was talking about that, it was all fascinating. I just want to pick your brain on some of that more later about Esalen. But I finished up stabilizing the little bonds in this thing and then added all these little white bits. They represent the hydrogen atoms, which are smaller atoms on the molecule and only make a single bond. And sort of, they do play important roles, but you can kind of think of them as placeholders. Anywhere that one of these other atoms would make a bond but doesn't, gets filled up with a hydrogen. So because of that, I just add them at the end as little dots. It sort of aesthetically looks right that way. It would take a lot longer if I had to prep an extra 20 or so little white orbs the same way I prepped the other ones. And then I jumped into making these little pegs sticking off the molecule.
Let me give them like a 5-minute warning.
So these will, these pegs will be used later to connect it to the pendant that I'm going to make with it. Before I make the pendant though, I'm going to jump into making the larger scale one.
So, I want to make a quick announcement for everyone who's joined us for the last 10 or 15 minutes. I really appreciate you guys coming in. I wanted to give you access to a few minutes of the class to see what an amazing thing that we're doing here in the studio today. There is a link in all of the things that I shared for you guys to sign up. You're welcome to sign up and be part of the class. You'll get 10 days of access to the workshop. So we have about 3 minutes left, then I'm going to turn off the other streams, but I just wanted to thank you guys for joining in for a few minutes.
Sorry about that, guys. I hopped off torch to grab a coffee real quick.
I got a question from YouTube.
Yeah.
Joe Ferguson, what's the most complex molecular structure you have put together?
It'd be deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA.
Nice.
I've done 2 DNA strands now, each of which was, first one was 8 base pairs long, and the second one was 9 base pairs long. So for reference, this DMT molecule I'm just finishing up right here was 14, what are called heteroatoms, everything except for the hydrogens, these little white ones. So there's 12 black ones and 2 blue ones on this one, 14 atoms total. The DNA strands I'd have to look up again in my notes, but I believe it was 480 little atoms.
Oh, wow.
So it was about this scale, but ended up being a piece that was 6 to 7 inches long. And then besides those, another complex one I've made a handful of is oxytocin, the love molecule.
It's an important one.
Super important. Everything from platonic, familial, sexual love, that just powerful feeling we all feel comes from oxytocin. That one's about 80 little atoms. So it's a little more approachable, but a lot more complex than this. So it's cool too, this tiny glass cools off so quick. You can see I was just melting those in and I can just grab it. That also allows me to completely avoid using kilns for work like this.
So there's a couple questions for you from our class.
Totally.
Elias wants to know what your favorite molecule is to create, or if you have a favorite, or if it's just the process.
Cool, so the favorite would probably be the one I just made, DMT, right here.
Cool. And then High Noon says, asking about annealing on scale this small.
So yeah, there's really no thermal stress introduced to the piece when it's this small because it heats up and cools down so fast. So I'm very confident that they don't ever need to see a kiln, and annealing in a kiln would not increase the strength of it. As soon as I incorporate them into other pieces, I definitely start using a kiln.
Cool.
I'll be talking a little bit as we continue the class here. This would probably be a good time to cut off the...
Yeah. All right, so I want... Am I on?
You're on.
Yeah, cool. So thank you guys, everyone who's been watching and watching the shared streams. We're going to cut that off now. If you'd like to join us for the rest of the class.
Say a quick thank you to you guys too. Thanks for checking out what I was doing, and definitely should tune in. I'm going to be doing a whole lot more than just that little micro guy.
Cool guys, thank you guys so much, and we hopefully see you soon.